Moonshine Jesus, nobody in the sky. Moonshine Jesus, baby, alright. Moonshine Jesus, a surprising delight. Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Hello and welcome to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We're glad that you can join us today. We are, as always, brought to you by progressivechristianity.org. We hope that you will check out the thousands of progressive Christian resources that we have available there. I'm Caleb, and I'm here today with my good buddy Mark. How you doing today, Mark?
I am doing great, Caleb. I'm excited about today's show. I know I always am, but this is going to be interesting. I think it's going to be really interesting.
Because today we're talking about Avatar, and
Yes,
we were
indeed.
chatting before this show, and we recognized that both of us went to go see Avatar in 2009 on opening weekend and haven't seen it since. And we watched it again.
Yes.
Right, just now.
I can't wait to get into some of that, man. I can't wait to get into some of that.
Me neither. But before we do, we need to let you know that if for some reason you haven't seen Avatar in these 13 years that you've had to see it, there will be some spoilers. So know that. We also hope that you'll follow us on social media. So, Mark, I'm excited today to hear what you're drinking. What have you got today?
I have made something that I'm calling a Navi citrus punch.
Okay.
It's citrus vodka, and then a white grape and peach juice. And then in blue, I always mess up the name, Caraco in there, squeeze a lime juice. And then to give it the evanescence, the sort of bioluminescence of the Navi, I put a little pearl dust in there on top of it. And it came out this lovely sort of Navi colored punch. So how about you? What do you have?
I love it. So I went with blue too, and so
nice.
1 ounce of blue curacao, and we did get
curacao. Thank you. I always blow that.
And we got the proper pronunciation in the comments. So thank you for helping us.
Appreciate that very much.
A couple ounces of vodka, and you fill it up to the top with LaCroix, just plain LaCroix. And so this is the Avatar. They got orange here. They've got the orange paint and all. So
absolutely,
I love it.
Nice color combination. Cheers to you, sir.
Cheers, Mark.
Yeah, I can drink a few of those. Yeah, how about yours?
Yeah, it is good. Maybe we should drink a few.
Yeah,
I'm going to try some of this.
Why don't we do that? And in the meantime, do a show as well after the break.
All right. Okay.
Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Hello and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. Today, we have already told you we're going to be talking about Avatar, which is the #1 box office film of all time. It was briefly beaten by one of the adventure movies, but with this re-release, it's already gained back its #1 spot. And for those who maybe don't remember the movie, it being the #1 box office, it almost seems like everybody's seen it. This is a tough one to give us a quick synopsis of, but I'm going to do my best. So when the brother of paraplegic Marine vet Jake Sully is killed, Sully takes his place on a mission to the lush alien planet of Pandora. And he quickly learns that the corporate bigwig, Parker Selfridge, who runs this sort of military-style base and research center on the planet, intends to drive off or even kill, if necessary, the native humanoids called the Navi in order to mine for an incredibly valuable piece of ore. The thing is, it's directly under the tree, this massive tree that the Navi live in. And ultimately, there's a problem with the planet's air because it's poisonous to people. So in order to interact with the native people, humans have to kind of link their minds to these human Na'vi hybrids called, of course, avatars. And quickly, Jake finds himself torn with loyalties between the militaristic corporation, the research team, and the Na'vi. And ultimately, they all end up in a battle for the very survival of the Na'vi and Pandora. And I left out tons of parts of the storyline.
That's a good summary.
That's kind of what we're looking at here. So I am very curious. You and I both have gone over a decade without seeing it at all. And we both have just watched it this past weekend. What was your what do you remember your initial reaction being when you watched it the first time? And was it similar or dissimilar from your experience this time around?
Yeah, so I thought about that a lot because I was remembering that, whenever this came out in 2009, there was all this promotion about the visuals, and so I kind of felt like I had to go see it when it came out because there was this fantasy movie with incredible visuals, and I wanted to see. And this was the movie that kind of started this, the 3D movie craze. I feel like we got a lot of that, and that wore thin pretty quickly. But this was the movie that kind of that really kind of started it. And so I remember my initial reaction to this movie being, "Wow, that's really cool. It's got impressive visuals, but it's kind of slow and a little boring." That was my impression. This was 2009.
Right.
So I was dreading it a little bit because I thought I remember that it's a very long movie.
Yes, indeed.
And so this time I did not go to the theater, in part because I wanted to see if the visuals held up without the 3D. And one of the things that was really cool sitting there watching it was I remembered seeing those visuals in 3D 13 years ago when I went. And so I thought this I think is pretty good proof that that it is visually stunning and that the visuals hold up even when you're watching it in 2D. That you can still you can still see the visual effects kind of advancements. So I think that I noticed some things that were maybe some problematic with the storyline that I'm sure we're going to get into, but those were kind of my initial reactions. How about you, Mark? Where'd you land?
I remember being very excited about this because it was James Cameron, and he was known already for being a great filmmaker, and there was already word getting out that this is going to change the way movies are done and all kinds of things. And ultimately, looking back, I guess it did. That was, like you said, early 3D in terms of good 3D. And frankly, I don't know why at the time, my eyes would never adjust to 3D glasses. It was like, it felt like a nightmare watching that show to me because my eyes kept fighting the 3D effect.
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to just relax, enjoy, but my eyes are like, no, we're not doing this. And so I was getting these weird blurred things. With you, I thought the story back then, I felt like it was slow. I didn't feel engaged in the story. I kind of lost interest, frankly. And much like you, this time around, I don't know that I was real excited about watching this. It's a big event, and we're going to, I'm sure, do Avatar 2, essentially, coming up in December, I think. So it was good for us to cover this and think about it. And I did. I wanted to go back to the theater and give it a real shot. So I went to one of the biggest screens in town, and I have to say it surprised me, man. I ended up really, except for one major, and I mean major issue, I really ended up loving this movie. And it kind of caught me by surprise. I think there is so much, it's interesting. It has historically been criticized for being somewhat derivative and having a fairly a simplistic storyline. And I just don't see that. I mean, I think this is an incredibly complex movie in terms of the things that it's trying to address and the problems in the world, which I know we'll get to in the next segment. And it does it in such a storytelling clean way. It can get very preacher at times, but there's so many things that it's doing that it doesn't telegraph, that you have to kind of sit with and think about to realize what's going on. I mean, what your experience the second time, more or less?
Yeah, I think so because the pacing hit me very differently this time too. Because, like I said, originally I'm like, oh, this is kind of slow, but this time I was sitting there and I'm like, no, we need this pacing to
Mm,
really get to feel a sympathy
yeah.
for these
Mm,
indigenous peoples here. We need to really understand because that's what we're doing here is we're learning about this unique culture and what's going on here. And so if we were to just say, oh yeah, there are people who are connected with the land, and we're going to take their land, and we're going to
mhm.
kill them if we have to, that's pretty simplistic, and it doesn't
Yeah.
really give us any kind of sympathy or empathy towards these folks. And I think feeling the empathy for them makes a big difference. But you also
Absolutely.
said, Mark, you said there's one big glaring error, and I think we can just name it, and it's that
Yeah.
there's a white savior.
That's
There's a
right.
white savior complex
Yeah.
for the movie,
That
right? And that's
that is
something
it.
that I didn't catch the first go round. Maybe it's because culturally we weren't talking about it in the same way. Maybe it's because I was a
Yep.
first year seminarian when the movie came out. I
Mhm.
don't know. But this time it was glaring to me.
Oh,
I'm like, oh,
yeah.
it's not just kind of problematic, it's problematic.
Yeah, for all the good this movie attempts to do, and it really does attempt to do a lot of good, it
Yeah.
really suffers because of this great white savior complex that it throws in. And if there is, and so I thought about this for a while, if there's any silver lining, if there's any
Mhm.
little tiny redeeming edge, it's that at least in the end, in order for our main one of our main characters, Sully, in order to be happy, to be whole, he
Mhm.
basically has to renounce everything that his male whiteness represents. And so,
Mm.
if there
Yeah.
is any like kind of redeeming edge, it's that. But it does not, and I mean edge, like infinitesimal, tiny little
Right.
edge, because it is such a glaring issue that
Right.
everybody ultimately gets saved by this one white dude.
Mhm. Yep.
Come on. Oh, the movie could be so great if it weren't for that horrific piece of crappy derivative storytelling. Ah, man, I hated it.
I did too, and I especially hated that we saw kind of nature choosing the white man. Right? It
Yeah,
wasn't
right.
even just that he
Yeah, that
was
was,
heroic and
yeah.
and rose to the occasion, but it was also like the sacred tree of life chose this man, and that's why his life is spared and he's lifted up. And then
Yep.
how he becomes the Teruk, the dragon rider,
Mhm.
and he goes around even after he's wronged all these people, even after he knows they're going to get destroyed and says nothing over the course
Yep.
of 3 months. They
Mm.
automatically forgive him and lift him up as their leader.
Ah,
And somehow or another, that's all forgiven, and all
yep.
the tribes of Pandora unite around him. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's
not
way too much.
believable. It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to
Yeah,
get past.
and it subtracts from so much of the rest of the movie. I was going to
Yeah,
ask you this question, and I hopefully will be able to bring it back into to
right.
how that issue subtracts from so many other great moments of the movie. So
Yeah.
I love this line where he gets lost in the woods in his avatar, and
Yeah.
what Natiri finds
Yeah.
him and saves him from these animals that are attacking him at night. And he goes to thank her for saving him by killing animals, which when she did,
Yeah.
she ignored him really and
Right.
took the animal out of its misery and said a prayer.
Right.
And she says, "Don't thank. This is sad, very sad
Yeah.
only."
Right.
And I thought that was powerful, and there was such a chance for the movie to have gone in a different direction from that, and celebrate
Yeah.
her
Yeah.
and where she goes from and everything. But it also made me think. This is a question I never asked you about a movie. How many times did you
Yeah.
get teary eyed in this movie?
um, a couple, and
Me too.
that was one of the moments, and it reminded me of what we were talking about last week. Actually, I think it was in our after the show. I don't think we ever got to it
Mhm.
last week. We were talking about prey, and we were talking about the sacred buffalo getting killed,
Yes,
and the main
and it
character
was the
who
white people.
Yeah, and it was the white people. But in that show, it was the woman who was the hero, who was the
Yes.
indigenous woman who
Right.
ultimately ended up being the hero,
So,
right? Over and
such a
against the white people.
stark contrast, right?
Such a stark contrast, because here we've got this woman who has the potential, right? Who probably, if
Yeah.
the movie were done today, hopefully, maybe we'll see an Avatar 2. Like, she could have been and should have been
Easily.
the hero here to teach us this lesson about how wrong it was that these animals had to be killed. And so I got teary eyed a few times, and especially I think the other time is whenever we see like I think the first time we see the bulldozers coming in the kind of that sacred forest where they go and pray, you know, they're the tree branches that come down, and they go to pray.
Where the
and so
tree of souls.
Right, and the forest before that, where they're all in there, and so we've gotten to spend time, right, seeing how it's sacred, seeing how they connect with the ancestors there. We've seen, and that's why I'm saying the pacing, I think, is right, because you get to experience it, and then it's all the more stark when a bulldozer comes in and just takes them down with no regard for life there. And so I think that teaches us a good lesson, like about deforestation today, right? We don't often give the time to think about the sacredness of trees, right? And plants and stuff. Maybe we're not praying to ancestors through them or whatever. But
that actually leads into one of the moments that I got all teary-eyed. Because throughout this, one of the things that is in the storyline that they kind of subtly are doing, almost as a background story, is how all of these trees are connected. And that there is this connectedness within every tree on this planet, and there's this giant life of all of these trees. And visually, I had this incredible moment, and this is where I go back to. There's so many things that could be great, but because it's white savior complex, it's just ruined so many things. It's like, so the moment that he goes through the ceremony to join the Navi, and he's in the center. And they slowly start forming rings around him, and they put their hands forward, almost like a laying of hands that some different denominations might do. And there's these rings that have all these connective pieces. You're seeing it from overhead, and it's just as glorious. Like I breathed deep, and my eyes got a little teary of the connectedness, and that's what being part of the community is this moment where we all stand together in oneness, and the connectedness to the trees and how they are connected underneath. And it's so beautiful and wonderful, except for the fact that at the center of the ring is the stupid white savior. It's just not they ruined so much with that little piece. It's just and I can't believe that 2009 was so long ago that the only way you can make a great movie is to have white men always be the most important, the people who save everything, and get forgiven for atrocities just simply because they're white men. And oopsie, I'm sorry, I'll do better.
I think one thing that changed our perspective on this, and I know we're about to end this segment, but was that this was, within the first year that Obama was president. And so like culturally, we were at a very different place then too. I'm thinking about why the white savior thing didn't hit me in the same way the first go round. After these, after the 4 years of Donald Trump, I think we have to be so much more keenly aware of all of that. And you're right. I had the same moment of power, the laying on of hands that struck me as churchy and religious, because it's something that I've seen so many times or participated in. And how problematic it is, even maybe in that context, that we're lifting up a single person. It's often the pastor, right? Who we then expect to be kind of the designated Christian of a church.
That's true. I've never heard it put that way, but that is so true.
You're going to be the Christian on behalf of all of us, and you need to be perfect. The rest of us will do whatever we want. You're going to be perfect. Anyway,
well, listen, it'd be easy to go on and on just about the storytelling and the levels of storytelling that they try to do in here, and how it's just because of one really terrible piece of the storytelling. it steps on what could be so many beautiful moments, and
Yeah.
I guess we can still try to extract lessons from it, but in order to do it, we have to kind of bracket out that that white savior in the midst of all of it, which feels exactly like what the movie does. He does everything wrong and he hurts so many people, but they like bracket him out and make it okay anyway and let him save them on top of it. So, but I'm sure there's more to talk about in our next segment as we talk more theologically and politically about this. So y'all hang with us and we'll see you on the other side of the drop.
Hello and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We're moving into our theology and political segment, and we started kind of diving into some of the politics of this movie. So in the last segment, so I think I'll pivot a little bit and talk maybe about some of the theology in here.
Lovely,
because there's a lot of that as well. And so we were just talking, Mark, about the roots and the interconnectedness. And one thing also that hit me this go round that I simply did not know the last time I saw this was that there's been scientific evidence to show that trees communicate with one another via their roots in the ground. And so there really is kind of a connection on Earth. You don't have to go to Pandora.
That's right.
Right here on Earth, we can see trees really connected with each other and communicating with each other. And so I really liked this idea in the movie that there is a source of energy that runs through all things. And so we hear that there's a network of energy that flows through all living things, and that your energy is just borrowed and then it's returned. And so that really meshes pretty well with my theology. You know, Mark, I've been pretty influenced by Taoism and the thought of the Tao, the way, this source of energy and life going through the universe. And if you're attuned to it, you can kind of pick up on it, and you can kind of go with the flow, and you can be led in that direction if you're paying attention. And so this movie kind of felt a little Taoist to me. The of energy and the interconnectedness of life, and I like that about this movie. Did anything about the energy resonate with you, or did you pick up on other theological themes that had to do with kind of this nature-oriented world?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think one of the interesting things for me that I don't know why it just kept coming to me during this movie. The Na'vi, we get set up very hard at the beginning of the movie of how humans are looking down on the Na'vi. And Na'vi represent, in the movie, they represent the indigenous peoples of North America. They represent the indigenous African folks. They intentionally blend those pretty well together. And they show a largely white group of militaristic corporations looking down their noses at them. And I kept thinking about first world, third world. And then as I watched what in this movie would be the third world, understanding their connectedness to life, understanding their connectedness to each other, to creation in general. We don't get much more theological than understanding our connectedness within creation. And I began to go, we definitely have labeled this wrong, because we're not first world. All the things that really matter in life, particularly from a spiritual point of view, they seem to have a lot better than we do. They definitely understand it, and you can see it running throughout and all of that connectedness. And I immediately then thought, what seemed like almost a throwaway line made me go, "Oh my gosh!" They were. He knew what he was doing from the beginning. When Sully's brother Tommy dies, they say it's a shame. He was basically killed for the paper in his pocket.
Right.
This movie is nothing but this setup to show that first world, where all we care about is profit and paper and are willing to kill over it no matter what, stands over and against third world countries that shouldn't be labeled as third world because it immediately makes you think of less than, who actually understand the important spirituality pieces of life and what makes life matter, what makes life good. I mean, we don't see a lot of happy militaristic corporate folks in this movie, but they're all about, and it's this one beautiful little simple line right at the beginning where Cameron basically says, "Hey guys, here's what I'm about to do. It's a shame he got killed just for the paper in his pocket." And ultimately, they're willing to kill an entire civilization for the paper that what is underground beneath them could bring them. I think it's incredibly spiritual commentary on our current reality. I mean,
I think that's right. And there's, we also see that through Jake himself, right? His brother is killed. And then we find out that he can't use his legs, even though he's a vet. He lost them while serving in the Marines. And he says that there's a cure for this. They can fix spines, but you got to have them. And you can't do it with vet benefits, not with this economy. And so it's a commentary, right, on when you're driven by militarism and when we're driven by profit primarily, that even the people who are being used as tools in that militarism and that profit, that we can't take care of it. And so this is clearly a commentary on the United States.
And we don't miss the fact that the movie's set in 2154. You want to talk about fatalistic imagining of the future, is that by 2154, we still don't have this healthcare issue figured out, where, it's profit matters a lot more than being able to give someone a piece of healthcare that's readily available, but you just can't afford it. So sorry.
Just can't afford it. Yeah, and so we also find out that the earth has been destroyed more or less because they said the earth used to be green, but now it's brown because we mined it for all of its resources and we didn't care for it. So yes, certainly a fatalistic view of the future, but not an unrealistic view of where we've been headed, right? Because we've seen profit over well-being time after time after time. And we've seen this with the climate crisis as well, that, we have the resources to invest in alternative fuels and alternative energy sources. But instead of doing that, we've given in to pressure from fossil fuel industries. And so even though we have the possibility to confront this, that we've been much slower to do this than we really need to be, because of profit, right? Just because of money. And so I think that this is one of the tools that Christianity really gives us, is that I think that there's a lot of things in the biblical narrative that are not very clear, that are up to interpretation and all of that. There's a lot of theology that we don't know and we can debate about. I think one thing that's not really up for debate is the biblical opinion on excessive wealth. I think that if you read through the Bible, from the prophets to Jesus, that we see a pretty clear view on not letting people have too much, that too much wealth or too little wealth are both destructive to life. That finding somewhere in the middle is the place where human beings thrive, where everyone has enough, but nobody has too much. And honestly, I think that's one of the reasons that I've stayed in the church all these years, is that is that at least for all the failings that Christianity has, and it has a lot, that at least we get a pretty clear view on how we're to approach economic justice. And that's that we're supposed to demand kind of a fairer, more equal distribution of wealth.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that this movie should at least begin to make us think about within that framework is that the current path we are on really makes it difficult to do that, because we value a more than what is real, more than people and relationships and creation, which are very real. We are valuing a made up measurement of value, I guess. Like we're putting the dollar, which is just doesn't really represent anything real other than a measurement of exchange that is not necessary. We're valuing it over everything else. And so this movie very clearly shows that there is a way to have a fully functioning society that is not economy based, that is based on the lifting up of all, the celebrating of all, and the respecting of life in general. And that's one of the things I loved about this was they frequently the Navi would say to each other, "I see you," and then the response back is, "I see you."
I see
And
you.
it reminded me. I preach on this from time to time. The Zulu greeting of Sawubona, which is "I see you," but it's a deeper "I see you." It recognizes the worth and the dignity of each person. Like it's not just "I see your person." I see your value. I see your dignity, and I feel like we have this stark showing of how the folks that are pursuing the society based on the economy don't see the value of any life. They're willing to destroy it. And then the folks who really do understand that have the better life and are more successful at being spiritually satisfied and having a thriving community rather than a warring community.
That's a great point. And, I know there's dangers in romanticizing, oppressed people and people who have little. And I don't think we're doing that. I do think that we are saying that, that there's something about being in touch with nature and being in touch with the need for community that is deeply grounding in a way that those of us who are concerned purely with materialistic things often miss. And so I think in terms of like seeing each other, one of the things that really stuck out to me this time was the constant use of dehumanizing slurs towards the indigenous folks on Pandora, right? So we get them called blue monkeys. We get them called roaches and a variety of other things where it is, language is being used as a tool so that we don't have to think about the kind of loss that these people will be experiencing. We don't have to think about the kind of loss of life that we're going to be inflicting, trying to get this, unobtainium.
Unobtainium, right?
Unobtainium, that's right. Trying to get
which is probably the worst word they made up for the whole show. They got so many: the Navi, Pandora, Home Tree, Sky People, Iwa, but unobtainium. Really, I'm sorry. That one. Every time they said it, I was like, "Oh, come on, you could have done better than that."
Okay, so I was kind of struck by that too. I'm like, maybe they're trying to make a commentary on wealth and the happiness that comes from wealth. Like maybe it's unobtainable, but it was bad.
Yeah.
No, I think you're just right.
It was a little too on the nose. I guess is my problem.
It was a little on the nose.
I do think you're right though.
Name. Yeah,
it
just happened to be. Yeah.
I do think you're right, though. I think that part of the reason that they use that name was to kind of just hint at, this is something that's not what you think this is going to bring you in life is never going to bring it to you in life. You're just going to always look for the next thing, whatever it is that's bigger and more valuable by your measurement. Whereas you're going to kill off a lot of people who could teach you so much about what good life is like and where real value is and how you can actually be successful without all of these weird measurements that really amount to nothing and cause you to be a much worse person in your attempt to pursue it.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a great place to transition to our next segment, Mark. We've got, there's a lot of theological and political stuff in here we could delve into. But here's the thing. We've got to try and make each other look stupid. And that's exactly what we're going to do in the next segment. We're going to come up with questions to try and make our co-hosts look stupid. Do it after the break.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We are glad that you have stuck with us to this final segment. Probably quietly our favorite segment because we get to either lob softballs or throw darts at our co-hosts with a question designed, hopefully, possibly, to stump them. From time to time, I like to be the benevolent host of this segment, and this is one of those times, Caleb. So instead of lobbing at you first, I'm going to hand the court over to you and and ask you to please attempt to make me look stupid, sir.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Mark. How benevolent of you today. I appreciate that.
From time to time. Don't expect it too much. Don't expect it too much.
I know. Yeah.
I was trying to learn from the movie that we watched and try to be, more giving and more. Yeah.
Always nice when we can embrace the values of the show that we're talking about. So here's another thing. Okay, so unobtainium maybe was kind of poorly named.
A little on the nose, right?
Another one.
I saying unobtainium just made me think of a comment that I was reading from Ellen Green, who it's not exactly unobtainium, but she's a longtime linguist, and she mentions, to your last point in the last segment, how much she hates when language is misused as a weapon, which is one of the things you were pointing out of how the language. So anyway, unobtainium isn't quite a weapon, but it's really a clumsy use of language, which as an English major really bothers me. But you go right ahead with your question.
Okay, so this is another language question, Mark.
Okay.
So it's, and maybe another point that was a little on the nose. So I'm guessing Pandora was probably not the indigenous name of the planet, but perhaps the name that the white settlers gave to the planet. Why do you think it was named Pandora, Mark? And how does that relate to the Pandoran myth? What do you think?
Well, I definitely think it's related to Pandora's Box for sure. I mean, they get there and they think they're doing one thing, and they open up the box, so to speak, and everything changes. They can't contain what is really there for them. They come with one expectation, and because of their ill intent, all kinds of ills come towards them. I mean, I don't know that there are many of the humans. I mean, we see a line of them surviving and leaving, but the death is incredible that happens to them. So, I mean, I think it has to be related to that, although there are certainly arguments we made for other things. But for me, it was humanity opening up Pandora's box by trying to force their needs and desires on a native peoples, and the native peoples, and not understanding them. Yeah. I think you always know there's going to be trouble in a movie when really early on people don't listen to the scientists. like immediately, if there's a scientist saying, hey, so there's this connective tissue that's making all these trees talk together and they can kind of communicate and it's really kind of cool, and then they don't listen to them, that's going to come back and bite you in the butt really hard, really fast. That's just the way these movies work. And I think a part of that was going on is like you're forcing all of what you want and your desires, and you're not even bothering to understand folks, and it ultimately becomes this nightmare for you. I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on why it's called Pandora?
Yeah, I think that's another, like, if you've got a significant thing in any movie that's named Pandora, that the box is going to be opened, and that you're not going to be able to stuff it all back in. So I also, I think you're right about that. I also think that at another level, it can be applied to the things that maybe Jake was learning whenever he opened Pandora's box and went into this culture, and he's flooded with this culture that kind of overwhelms and overtakes him in a way that once he has experienced that, there's no going back to who he used to be. And so there's that key moment where he's doing his video log and he says, I don't even know who I am anymore. Things have flipped And that
Yeah.
is the reality, and this is the dream. And so I think whenever he experiences this, he experiences all this flooding of nature and
Mhm.
connection in a way that he finds kind of this deeper meaning. And I think there's truth to be said about that for all of us as we experience this kind of deeper, more grounding kinds of realities.
I'm sorry. I think that's a little too on the nose. I think you're right. I definitely think you're right. That's great, man. I completely agree. That's a very large part of it. Very large part of it. Well played.
Okay,
Sir. Well played.
you got one for me.
right.
You got one for me.
All right. Here's my question for you.
Okay.
It's I think about 6 words.
Okay.
Will profit-based economies destroy creation? Humanity and the world. Will profit-based economies? Because I mean, that is, if there is a very clear message in the movie, this is it.
Yeah, right. So I think if we don't do something to turn things around, not only will it, but it already is and has to some degree, right? Like scientists, like the scientists are sounding their horns now, right? Mark, you're talking about scientists giving a very clear warning at the beginning of the movie. This is our beginning of the movie with the scientists blaring their horns saying, hey, climate change is irreversible at this point. There is nothing that we can do to go back and fix the problems that we've already created. All we can do is stop and try not to make it any worse. This is the alarm sounding. And so I think, that if we are just focused on profit, and we are, right? There's no other reason not to be investing in alternative energy sources. We have the technology. We're just not doing it because there are too many powerful people who want money, who have powerful lobby and powerful interests in Congress and in other legislative bodies around the world that they have those powers for profit. And it is literally, not figuratively, it is literally destroying this world. So yeah, I absolutely think that economies that are solely driven by profit are destroying the world right now. Not only will they, but they are. How about you? What do you think, Mark?
Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely think that the course that we are on is not sustainable. And I think 13 years ago, James Cameron was trying to tell us this, because he wrote this, and frankly, even before that, because his concept for this movie actually started, I think, in 96 or 97.
In the 90s,
when he started writing it. He had a 90-page write-up about it.
Yeah.
All the way back then, the technology just wasn't where it needed to be to do this. So he's been thinking about this and talking about it for almost 2 decades, really. And it was meant to be a warning to us, and it just shows you the power of money and how money can corrupt, and how the love of money is one of the roots of evil. Because there's plenty of information to know that our profit-based economies are not only destroying the creation, as you mentioned, but destroying peoples, destroying entire groups of peoples.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're not willing to pay attention to that, once again, pay attention to destroying things that are real for the sake of something that really isn't real. It's a man-made creation of a measurement of value. I'm very worried. And honestly, it's one of the brilliant things about this movie. I wasn't a fan when we first watched it. I am a fan of it now, outside of the white savior crap. I'm a fan because it does very clearly tell us that our modern advancement that we're so proud of has actually been in the wrong direction. And that what we really need to be doing is backing up and turning to native and indigenous peoples who have long histories of understanding how life has meaning that is based on real things, and how that can create. Again, there's plenty of wars, there's plenty of battles between native groups, but the satisfaction of life is so much better. I mean, we know this, most of us, when we're not pursuing the almighty dollar, when we're in a position where we don't have to worry about money, we're much happier people.
Yeah, right.
This movie for me is telling us we need to reevaluate everything that we're doing in terms of our value that we put on profit-based economies, and back up and learn from folks that we have allowed profit to destroy.
I like it, Mark. That sounds right to me. And I'm with you. I think I wound up enjoying Avatar much more this time around. And so I'm glad we went back and watched it. I was glad to have the chance to revisit it. And I'm excited maybe to talk about Avatar 2 in December.
Yeah. I think, with all of the years that have gone in between and the advancements in storytelling and the public's willingness to let us tell stories that are healthier in terms of not needing a white savior, I'm hopeful. I am very hopeful. But what we really need to talk about is next week and what we're going to cover in the show.
Right. Yeah.
So you and I both are massive Star Wars fans.
We are. We feel the Force is with us. Mark, the Force is with us.
Yeah, I am with the Force, and the Force is with me. I am with the Force, and the Force is with me. That's from Rogue One. For those who don't know, a prequel to the Star Wars trilogy, the original Star Wars trilogy. Mm-hmm. And I bring that up because what we're going to look at next week is a prequel to Rogue One, which was a prequel to the Star Wars trilogy. So we're going to be looking at a prequel to a prequel that's called Andor. There's already 3 episodes out. There'll be a 4th one before our show. And just to give the online description, it says, in an era filled with danger, deception, and intrigue, Cassian will embark on a path that is destined to turn him into a rebel hero. I mean, come on. Bum, bum, bum. I mean, that's a great setup, man. It's honestly, I've watched the first 3 episodes. It is incredibly well done. Maybe the best Star Wars serial out there. I mean, it's only 3 shows, so it's hard to say, but it definitely has the potential. So this should be a lot of fun, and we will be talking about it the next time on the Moonshine Jesus Show.
Woo!
Moonshine Jesus.